My name is Walt Hendricks. I'm 63 years old. And on the day my son told a room full of investors that I was too old to lead my own company, I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I did not even stand. I simply sat there in the chair I had built from nothing and listened while my own boy asked strangers to vote me out of my family's business. I had spent 31 years building that company. I knew every person on the floor by name, and my son stood in front of everyone and treated me like I had become a burden instead of the man who had made the place possible. Before I take you back to that room, take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. It means more than you know. What my son forgot was that, a long time ago, I had written something down that he had never bothered to read. Now let me take you back to that morning in March, the day everything I had built was placed on the table for a vote. The email arrived on a Tuesday. It was the annual investor meeting notice, scheduled for the second week of March. On paper, it looked ordinary. I had led that meeting 29 times. I could have written the agenda from memory with my eyes closed, but this year, the agenda was not mine. Dawson had taken over the scheduling. My son loved systems, calendars, color-coded spreadsheets, and clean digital workflows. I kept telling myself that was a good thing. A father is supposed to be proud when his son steps up. I scrolled through the agenda. Quarterly numbers, supplier contracts, vendor renewals, the usual business. Then I saw one line I did not recognize. Leadership and future direction. I read it twice. I did not know what it meant, so I walked down the hall to ask. Marcus Vale was in Dawson's office when I got there, and the door was half open. Marcus was our chief financial officer, hired 3 years earlier from somewhere out east. He wore sharp suits and had an even sharper smile. When I knocked, he looked up and welcomed me in. I pointed to the agenda item and asked what leadership and future direction was supposed to mean. Dawson did not even look up from his screen. He said it was just a planning discussion, long-term stuff. I asked what we were planning for. Marcus folded his hands and told me I would see. That they had exciting ideas. There was something in the way he said it. Too polished. Too rehearsed. But I was 63, tired, and still trusting my son. I told him to surprise me, then went back to my office. I did not think much more about it that day. I had a company to run, 200 people counting on me, and a meeting to prepare for. I had built that place to outlast me, and I wanted Dawson to be ready. What I did not understand was that Dawson already believed he was ready, and in his mind, I was the thing standing in his way. Let me tell you about Hendricks Millworks. I started it in 1994 with a borrowed truck, a lease shed outside Bradboro, Vermont, a bandsaw, and a stubborn belief that people still wanted furniture built to last. 31 years later, we had 200 employees. We made dining tables strong enough to outlive the people who bought them. And I knew every soul on that floor. That morning, I walked the line the way I always did, coffee in hand. I greeted Hank at the Sanders and asked how his daughter Katie was liking college. He told me she was homesick, but she would toughen up. I stopped by the assembly bay, where Ray Tomlin was checking a joint. Ray had been with me for 28 years. He was my floor manager and the best I had ever had. He was 60, 18 months from retirement, and his pension was tied to that company just like everyone else's. I mentioned the big meeting coming up, and Ray smiled at first, but then he set down his square and asked if he could say something. I told him he could always say something. He glanced around, lowered his voice, and told me some of the young suits had been around asking strange questions about the books and what the place was worth if somebody wanted to buy it. I almost laughed. I told him nobody was buying us, that the place was not for sale. He looked at me for a long moment and said he had not said it was, he was only telling me what he had heard. I clapped him on the shoulder and told him he worried too much. But walking back to my office, my coffee did not taste right anymore. Strange questions about the books. Strange questions about the value of the company. I told myself it was nothing. I was wrong about a lot of things that week. 2 days before the meeting, I came back late to grab a folder I had left behind. The lights were off in the main hallway, but Dawson's office was glowing. The door was cracked, and I heard voices before I meant to. Marcus was saying the exit window was perfect, that valuations were high, and that if they moved now, they could maximize. Then I heard Dawson talk about headcount. He said a buyer would trim the burden. Standard process. The old floor crew, the legacy pension obligations, all of it would get restructured. My hand froze on the doorframe. Then Dawson said I would never sign off on cutting those people, because I knew them all by name, and that was a problem. Marcus answered that they would make it so I did not have to sign anything. He said they would handle the leadership question first, and the rest would follow. I should have walked in right then. I should have asked exactly what they meant. But I did not understand it yet, and my mind reached for the version that let me keep loving my son without fear. Growth, I told myself. Expansion, new investors. That was what young men in suits talked about. Then Marcus said the name Smith Capital. He said Smith Capital was ready when they were, and that they had done a dozen of these, clean and fast. I did not know who they were. The word exit kept rattling around in my head, but I did not yet have the full shape of it. I picked up my folder from the front desk and left before they heard me. Driving home, I kept hearing Dawson's voice. I would never sign off. It was a problem. After 31 years, I had become a problem to be handled. I still did not know exactly how. I only knew the ground under me had shifted, and I could not tell anyone yet because I did not even know what to say. That night, I could not sleep. I went down to my study. There was an old fireproof safe in the closet, the kind with a dial. I had owned it since the beginning. I told myself I needed to find my homeowner's policy, something boring to occupy my hands. I spun the dial, and the door opened with a groan. Inside was 30 years of paper, tax records, the deed to the first shed, a photograph of me and Ray on opening day, both of us thinner, dumber, and grinning like fools. Beneath it all was a thick folder soft at the corners from age. The founding documents. I pulled them out. They were the original incorporation papers for Hendricks Millworks, drawn up in 1994. I had written most of them myself at my kitchen table back when I trusted handshakes more than lawyers. I flipped through the articles of incorporation, the original bylaws, clauses I had not read in 20 years. My eyes caught on a paragraph near the back. Something about founder authority and control of the company. I started to read it, then I stopped. It was late, my head hurt, and honestly, some part of me did not want to know that I might need it. I put the folder back. I told myself I was being paranoid. Dawson was my son. Whatever he and Marcus were planning, surely it included me. Surely I had misunderstood what I had heard. I found the insurance policy, shut the safe, and went upstairs. I left those papers sitting in the dark. I had no idea that what I had just held in my hands was the only thing that could protect 200 jobs. I had no idea my son was betting his entire plan on the certainty that I would never open that folder again. The morning before the meeting, I gathered the senior crew in the break room. There were 8 of them, including Ray, Hank, and Dolores from the office, who had 31 years on the books and had been there since day one. These were men and women who had given me their working lives. I had called the meeting to calm them, but if I am honest, I had called it to calm myself too. I told them I had been hearing rumors about the company being for sale. Nobody spoke. A few of them looked at the floor, which told me they had heard it too. I told them I wanted them to hear one thing from me. Nobody who had given me 30 years would walk away with nothing. Their pensions were tied to the place, and as long as I was standing, the company would not be carved up and sold for parts. Dolores's eyes went glassy. She admitted they had been worried. I told them not to be. I had built that company for all of us. Ray cleared his throat and said if the young fellows had other ideas, they would have to come through me. Then there was a sound at the doorway. I turned and saw Dawson standing there with a coffee in his hand and his face very still. He had heard us. I did not know how much. He greeted everyone lightly and called it a pep talk. I told him I was just talking with my people. He repeated the words, your people, and something flickered behind his eyes. He smiled, but it did not reach anything real. Then he turned and walked back down the hall, his footsteps slow and even. The room felt colder after he left. Ray looked at me and said Dawson had not liked hearing that. I said he was my son, and that he would understand. But I had seen my own boy's face go blank in the way a man's face goes blank when he has just decided something. I did not yet know what he had decided about me. Here is the thing I am not proud of. I never caught up with the computers. The floor, the wood, the customers, the people, the machines, all of that I knew cold. But the new software Marcus had rolled out, the dashboards, the cloud reports, the analytics he was so proud of, those lost me. Marcus knew it too. Lately, he had been very eager to help. He would pull a chair too close and tell me he would walk me through it, that it was simple once I got it. It was never simple. He clicked through screens too fast, and I nodded along half lost. He would ask if it made sense, and I would say yes when it did not. That afternoon, he caught me at my desk, struggling with a report that would not open. He asked if I was having trouble. I said the thing would not load. He leaned over, took my mouse, fixed it in 2 seconds, and told me there it was. I thanked him. He lingered. Then he said nobody expected a man my age to keep up with all this, that it was a lot, a man my age. He said it kindly. That was what made it sting. He went back to his office, and the door did not latch all the way. I got up to stretch and passed by. His screen was still on, with an email half-typed. I was not trying to read it, but 2 words jumped out before I could look away. Transition plan. That was all I saw. The rest was numbers and a name I did not catch. He came back around the corner, and I kept walking like I had seen nothing. Transition plan. Transition to what? I went home that night with a knot in my chest I could not name. 2 words and a feeling. Every time Marcus had helped me, he had been building a case. I just had not understood what the case was for. The next day I would. That evening, my phone rang. It was Nell Brooks, our company attorney for 19 years. Nell was smart as a whip, and honest to a fault. If she was calling after hours, something was wrong. I asked her what was going on. She said maybe nothing, but something had been bothering her. Dawson's office had requested a full copy of the company's share structure the week before. The cap table, ownership percentages, all of it. I said he was running the meeting, so it made sense. She agreed that it might, except he had asked for everything except one thing. He had not asked for the founding documents or the original bylaws. I sat down slowly and asked why that mattered. Nell said that was the strange part. If someone was studying who controlled a company, those were the first papers to read. They were the foundation. Dawson had skipped right over them, as if he did not know they mattered, or did not know they existed. I thought about the folder in my safe. I thought about the paragraph I had stopped reading. I asked what was in those founding documents, especially the control parts. Nell was quiet for a moment. She said it had been years since she had looked, but there were founder provisions in there. Then she asked if Dawson knew what was in them. I almost said, of course he did, because he had grown up in the company. But had he ever actually read them? Had I ever shown him? Why would he need to? Nell said maybe he would not, but someone was making moves around control of the company, and the one document defining control was the one nobody was looking at. That worried her. I asked if I should read them that night. She said it could not hurt, and told me to call her after the meeting either way. I hung up and looked toward the study, toward the safe. I should have opened it right then. I should have read every word. Instead, I told myself I would do it tomorrow. The meeting was in the morning. I stayed up late writing my remarks. It was not really a speech. I had led 29 of these meetings, and I had never read off cards. I spoke from the floor the way you talk to people you respect. This year, I wanted to talk about the future. I wanted to talk about bringing in younger leadership the right way, modernizing slowly and steadily without losing what made us who we were. I wrote about Dawson, about how proud I was of him, about giving him more responsibility and time when he was ready. I pictured the two of us up there together, father and son, starting the next chapter. I see now how foolish that sounds. Around midnight, my wife Carol came down in her robe. Carol had been beside me through all of it, through the lean years and the good ones. She asked if I was still at it. She read over my shoulder and told me it was a good talk. Then she asked softly if I really thought Dawson was ready for more. I said he was my son, so of course he was. She did not answer right away. She only told me to be careful about giving away too much too fast. I told her it was Dawson and that he would never hurt the place. She kissed the top of my head and went back upstairs. I sat there a while longer, reading my notes, feeling good, feeling like a man at the top of a long climb, ready to share the view with his boy. I never went to the safe. I never read those papers. I figured I had years to sort all that out. I shut off the light and went to bed proud of my son. I had never been more wrong in my life. The conference room was full by 9 o'clock. We held the annual meeting in the big room upstairs, the one with the long table and the windows overlooking the floor. Investors filled the chairs, some I had known for years, and a few younger faces I did not recognize, brought in by Dawson. Marcus sat at the far end with a tablet in his hand, calm as a lake. Dawson sat beside the head of the table. My chair was at the head, the same as always. I opened the meeting the way I always did. I thanked everyone for coming, said it was good to see familiar faces and new ones. Dawson tapped his pen and suggested I give my remarks first to get us started. I thought that was generous of him, letting his old man lead off. So I stood. I talked about the year, about steady numbers, strong orders, and the work ahead. Then I got to the part I cared about most, the future, modernization, and bringing along the next generation the right way. I told them the company's strength had always been its people. We grew without leaving anyone behind. That was the Hendricks way. A few investors nodded. I felt good. I felt like myself. I sat down. Then Dawson stood. He buttoned his jacket and looked around the room, taking his time. When his eyes finally landed on me, there was something in them I had never seen directed at me before. He thanked me and said it had been a lovely speech. The word lovely landed wrong, like a pat on the head. Then he said we needed to talk about the future, the real future of the company. He turned to the room and said he did not believe we could do that with me in that chair. The room went very still, and I realized the meeting had never been mine at all. For a second, I thought I had misheard. I asked Dawson quietly what this was. He did not look at me. He clicked the remote, and the screen behind him lit up with charts, graphs, and red arrows pointing down. He told the room he loved his father, and everyone knew that. But love could not run a company. Numbers did. Marcus rose smoothly and took over in a way that made it obvious the two of them had rehearsed. He said we should look at the data. Growth had flattened for 3 years. Our competitors had digitized, and we had not. Decisions were being made on instinct and sentiment, not analysis. He clicked through slide after slide. Every chart bent the wrong way. Every number was framed to make me look like a relic. What Marcus did not show was that those same 3 years had passed without layoffs. He did not show that we had kept every job through a hard market. He did not show that the so-called sentiment he sneered at was the reason 200 families were still eating. He said Hendricks Millworks was a good company that could be a great one with the right leadership. Investors shifted in their seats. Some watched me, some studied their hands. One younger investor nodded along with every slide like he had already decided what he thought of the old man at the head of the table. I felt my face go hot. 31 years had been reduced to red arrows. I started to stand and defend the numbers, the people, and all of it. Then I stopped myself, because I looked at Dawson's face and understood this was not a debate. It was an ambush, and a man does not win an ambush by getting loud. So I sat back down. I folded my hands and listened. Marcus said there was more, then clicked to the next slide. I did not know. It could get worse. It was about to. Dawson took the floor again. He had been waiting for this part. He said he wanted to be direct because someone had to be. Then he turned and looked straight at me, and the whole room followed his eyes. He said I was 63 years old. He said I had built the place and that everyone respected that, but the truth was I was too old to run the company. He said I could not keep up with the technology, that I made decisions with my heart instead of the numbers, and that I was holding all of them back. Too old. 2 words said out loud in front of everyone I had spent my life working beside. I had heard men whisper things like that. I had felt it in the way Marcus talked to me. But hearing my own son say it to a room full of investors was a different kind of cut. I kept my face still. I had learned that much in 63 years. Do not let them see it land. But it landed. The young investor in the third chair nodded faster this time. A couple of others looked uncomfortable, as if they agreed but wished it had not been said so plainly. An older man near the window frowned, looked at me, then looked away. Dawson proposed moving me into an honorary role, founder emeritus, keeping my name on the door while transferring operational leadership to a team equipped for the future. Then he asked to call a vote right then to transfer day-to-day control. Marcus was already passing out paper ballots. My son had just asked a room full of people to retire me from my own life's work, and he was smiling while he did it. Dawson asked for all in favor. Hands started moving toward ballots, and still I said nothing. You might think a man would explode in a moment like that. Part of me wanted to stand, slam the table, and tell them exactly what I thought of red arrows, rehearsed speeches, and a CFO who had spent 3 years in a company I had given my life to. But I had learned something over the years. When you are cornered, the loud man loses, the calm one buys time. So I sat and watched. I counted faces. 12 investors had real voting weight. I tried to read each one. The young ones leaned Dawson's way. The older ones, the people who remembered the lean years, looked torn. I looked at Marcus. He was not watching me. He was watching the ballots, counting in his head, just like I was. That told me everything. This was about the count. They had done the math before they ever walked into the room. Dawson glanced over, maybe expecting me to beg, maybe hoping for it. I cleared my throat, and the room quieted. Before anyone marked a paper, I said I wanted to say one thing. Dawson tensed. I told him it would only be one thing. I said they were welcome to their vote, and I would not stop a single hand. He blinked because that was not the reaction he had braced for. I only asked that everyone in the room understand exactly what they were voting on. All of it. Not just the slides Marcus had shown. Marcus quickly said it was a leadership vote and that it was very simple. I asked if it was. I let the question hang. A few investors exchanged looks. Then I told them to mark their ballots, and I would respect the count. I only asked that we all read the fine print before the day was done. I sat back. Dawson did not know what to make of it. Neither did Marcus. Good. Let them wonder. Because I had just remembered exactly what was sitting in my safe. The ballots came back. Marcus counted them at the head of the table, slow and theatrical, as if he wanted everyone to feel the weight. 7-5, he announced, in favor of the transition. A murmur went through the room. Dawson exhaled, and a grin broke loose before he could hide it. 7-5. By 2 votes, the room had agreed to take the day-to-day running of my company out of my hands. I had expected it. It still hit like a fist. But I had watched their faces as they marked the ballots, and I saw something worth remembering. The ones who voted against me were not angry at me. They were frightened by Marcus's slides, the red arrows, the flat growth. They thought they were saving the company from a tired old man. They had voted on his numbers, not their own eyes. Numbers I now knew had been shaped to mislead them. Marcus announced that, effective immediately, operational leadership would transfer to a management committee chaired by Dawson Hendricks. A couple of investors clapped lightly, uncertainly. The older man by the window did not move. Dolores was not in the room, but I thought of her face when she heard. Dawson stood, riding the moment. He thanked everyone and said this was the right call for the company's future. Then he said that now leadership was settled. He wanted to share where that future was headed. He nodded to Marcus, who pulled up a new slide. A logo appeared, the same clean letters I had seen in that email. Smith Capital Partners. Dawson said they had been in conversation with Smith Capital, a firm that specialized in helping companies like ours reach the next level. He said they were going to explore strategic options together, including a possible sale. A sale, he said it like it was a gift. The older investors stiffened. One of them asked if he meant a sale of the whole company. Dawson answered smoothly that they were exploring options, nothing decided. But I had heard them through that door. I knew exactly what options meant. Cut the people. Remove the pension obligations. Cash out. So that was the play. Take my chair first, sell the company second, and do it all before the old man understood what was happening. He had done the first part. He thought the rest would be easy. After the meeting broke up, I went down to the floor. I needed air that did not smell like betrayal. Ray found me by the loading dock. His face was gray, and he said the whole floor had heard. News travels fast in a place like that. But that was not why he had come. He pulled a folded printout from his coveralls and told me Hank's nephew worked in the mailroom. The paper had come through the shared printer that morning. Marcus must have sent it by mistake. And Hank thought I needed to see it. I unfolded the page. It was a summary document on Smith Capital letterhead. I read it twice, to be sure. The plan was all there in plain numbers. Smith Capital would acquire Hendricks Millworks, close the main mill within 90 days, move production overseas, eliminate roughly 90 positions, and restructure the legacy pension obligations. 90 jobs. The pensions. Everything I had promised. Those people in the break room not 2 days earlier. At the bottom was a line about advisory fees. Marcus Vail was listed as transaction advisor, set to collect a percentage at closing, a large one. So that was his cut. He had not just helped Dawson push me out. He had built the whole thing to line his own pockets. I stood there on that dock, holding the paper, and something in me went very quiet. Up to that moment, I will be honest, part of it had been about pride. About a son who called me old in front of people I respected. About my own bruised heart. But that was the moment it stopped being about my pride. Hank. Dolores. The man at the Sanders with a daughter in college. Ray, 18 months away from a pension that was about to vanish. They could not fight this. They did not have the standing. But I did. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Then I told Ray I needed to make a phone call. Let me step out of the story for just a moment. If you have ever been told you were past your prime by someone who never built a thing in their life, you know exactly how my chest felt standing on that dock. That cold, quiet anger. If any of this is hitting home for you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so a story like this can find other folks who have been there too. Now stay with me, because what my son forgot to read changed everything. I called Nell from my truck. I told her it had happened. They had voted me out of operations 7-5, and Dawson had announced a sale to a firm called Smith Capital. There was a long silence. Nell told me she was sorry. I told her not to be sorry. I needed her to be useful. Then I told her about the printout, the planned mill closing, the 90 jobs, the pensions, and Marcus's advisory fee. When I finished, her voice had changed. The sympathy was gone, and the lawyer was back. She asked if I could come to her office that night. I told her I was 20 minutes out. She told me to bring the founding documents, the originals from 1994, the ones in my safe, not copies, the actual papers. I drove home first, opened the safe, and took out the soft-cornered folder I had put back 2 nights earlier, the one I had been too tired to read. Then I drove to Nell's office downtown. The lights were on after hours, just her and a pot of bad coffee. She spread the documents across her desk and started reading. I watched her eyes move. I watched her go back and read one section twice. I watched something shift in her face. She asked if I had used a lawyer when I wrote these. I told her I could not afford one. I had copied the structure from a book and changed it to fit. She asked if anyone had amended them in 31 years. I told her not that I knew of. I asked why. She looked up at me, and for the first time all day, I saw something in her face other than dread. She said I had spent 30 years protecting those people, and she thought it was time we let the document protect me. I asked what it said. Nell turned the page toward me and tapped a paragraph near the back, the same paragraph I had stopped reading 2 nights before. She said my son had made one very expensive mistake. Then she read it out loud, slowly, so I would hear every word. The founding bylaws created 2 classes of authority: regular shares, which carried regular votes, and a single block of founder shares held by me, the originating founder, for as long as I retained them. Then came the part that mattered. Any sale of the company, any transfer of its core assets, any change in the fundamental control of Hendricks Millworks could not be finalized without the written approval of the founder's shares. Mine. I asked her to read that part again. She did. No change of control was valid without founder approval. As long as I held those shares, nobody could sell the company over my head. Not the board. Not Dawson. Not a 7-5 vote. Nobody. I sat back. My heart was pounding. I told her they had voted me out of running the place. She said they had voted me out of day-to-day operations, and the bylaws allowed that. But operations and control were 2 different things. They could take my chair. They could not sell what I still controlled. I told her I had sold off most of my shares over the years to bring in investors and grow. I was down to maybe 30%, which was how they had outvoted me. She said ordinary shares were one thing, but I had kept the founder's block. I had never sold those. The bylaws tied the founder's veto to that block, not to majority ownership. On a sale or change of control, my signature was required, period, and I would never give it. I thought about Dawson, asking for the cap table, asking for everything except these papers. He had never read them. He did not know the clause existed. Nell said Marcus probably assumed the operating agreement he had drafted replaced the original bylaws, but I had never properly adopted his version. She had checked the minutes. It was never ratified. The original 1994 bylaws were still the law of the company. She set the page down and said they had built their entire plan on a document nobody bothered to read. I looked at those papers I had written at my kitchen table 31 years earlier. The handshakes, the cheap pen, my own careful handwriting. Then I asked when the signing was. The signing was set for Friday, 3 days away. Dawson had moved fast. Smith Capital wanted to lock terms while valuations were high. There would be a closing session in the big conference room, with investors, the Smith Capital team, lawyers, and documents ready to sign. A formal event to sign the letter of intent and start the sale. Nell said we had a problem. If we showed up cold and waved the papers, Marcus would stall. He would claim the bylaws had been superseded. He would demand litigation. That could drag on for months, and in the meantime, the rumor that the company was selling would do damage all by itself. Orders would dry up. People would panic. I asked what we should do. She said we should let them get all the way to the table. Everyone in the room, Smith Capital ready to sign. Then we would make it impossible for them to deny what was in front of them, publicly, with every investor watching. She wanted to spring it at the closing. She wanted them to have no room to spin it. The original document would be read aloud in front of the people whose votes they needed. Once the investors understood the sale was legally void without my signature, Smith Capital would walk away. No firm would close a deal it could not enforce. I nodded slowly. It was right. Quiet, clean, and over before it truly began. But that afternoon, something went wrong. I came back to the office to clear my desk, and Marcus was waiting in the hall. He said he had heard I visited Nell Brooks late the night before. I told him I had a right to speak with the company lawyer. He smiled without warmth and said of course, he only hoped I was not planning anything that would embarrass my son, because Dawson had worked so hard for this. Then he walked off before I could answer. That night, Nell called and told me they had moved the signing up. It was now tomorrow morning. They knew something was coming. I told her that, in that case, so did we. Before I ever picked up those papers for the final time, I tried once more to do it as a father. I drove to Dawson's house that evening. He was surprised to see me. He let me into the kitchen with his arms already crossed. He said if I had come to fight the vote, it was done. I told him I was not there about the vote. I sat at his table and told him I was there about the sale, the mill closing, the 90 jobs, and the pensions. Something flickered across his face. He had not known I knew that part. He called it restructuring and said that was how these deals worked. I told him those were people. Hank, Dolores, Ray. People who had held our family up when we were nothing. He said they would get severance. I told him they would be broken. I kept my voice level. I told my son I was giving him a chance. Walk away from Smith Capital. Run the company. I would even step back and let him do it. Just do not sell those people out. For 1 second, just one, I thought I saw the boy I had raised. Then it closed over. Dawson said I did not get it. He told me he was in debt from bad investments, and he needed this to work. Then he said I would have run the company into the ground by holding on to people who could not keep up, the same way I could not keep up. There it was. The truth under all of it. He said it was already done, and that I should have retired with dignity when I had the chance. I stood up. My hands were steady. Something in me had finished grieving. I repeated the word dignity, and told him we would see who had it in the morning. I walked out, sat in the truck for a minute before starting it, and knew I had lost something in that kitchen that would not come back easily. But I had also stopped hoping. And a man who has stopped hoping is finally free to act. That night, Nell and I prepared. We worked at our kitchen table until 2 in the morning. She made copies of the original bylaws, marked the founder provision, and pulled the company minutes showing Marcus's operating agreement had never been ratified. She placed everything in a clean folder, tabbed and ready. I asked her to walk me through it again. She said we would arrive together. We would let them run the meeting. We would let Smith Capital lay everything out. We would let Dawson feel like he had won. Then, before any signature touched paper, she would ask one question about founder authority, and we would read the clause aloud. If Marcus argued, we would let him. The minutes proved his version was never adopted. The 1,994 bylaws stood. There was no argument that survived the actual document. I asked about Smith Capital. Nell said a firm like Smith did not buy a lawsuit. The second they understood the sale was unenforceable without my signature, they would leave. She told me to trust her. I looked at the folder, such a small thing. A few pages I had written by hand before Dawson was even out of grade school. Nell asked if I was all right. I told her my son was going to be embarrassed in front of everyone the next day. Nell said my son had chosen that room, not me. She was right. I had given him every chance. The break room, the kitchen. He had looked me in the eye and chosen the money. I thought about Hank's daughter, homesick at college. I thought about Dolores and her 31 years. I thought about Ray. 18 months away from a pension someone wanted to erase with a signature. I told Nell we should go to bed because it would be a big day. She smiled, tired, and said I sounded like a man who was going to win. But I did not feel like winning. I felt like a man about to do something hard and necessary. They thought they were gathering to close the deal. They were actually gathering to watch it collapse. The conference room was fuller than I had ever seen it. All 12 investors were back. The Smith Capital team sat along one side, 3 of them in expensive suits, with a junior holding a leather folder full of documents ready to sign. Marcus stood near the screen. Dawson sat at the head of the table, in my chair. When he saw me come in, he straightened and said he did not think I would come. I told him it was still my company, and I would not miss it. A few investors glanced at each other. The older man by the window, Tom Bradley, an early backer who had known me for 20 years, gave me a small, searching look. Nell came in behind me with the folder under her arm. Marcus's eyes went straight to it and narrowed. He said this was a closing session and that it was really for principals only. I told him Mrs. Brooks was company counsel, and she belonged in any room where company documents were being signed. Nell took a seat against the wall, calm as Sunday. I sat near the end of the table, not at the head. I did not need the head. Dawson cleared his throat and started. He said they were there to formalize the partnership with Smith Capital. He nodded to their lead, Mr. Avery, and asked him to walk everyone through the terms. Avery stood and began speaking about acquisition price, timeline, and operational efficiencies. He used a lot of soft words for closing a mill and ending 90 careers. I watched the investors listen. Some nodded, some looked uneasy. Tom Bradley's jaw was tight. The junior slid the signature pages to the center of the table, with a heavy pen beside them. Avery said if there were no objections, they could proceed to signatures. Dawson reached for the pen. I looked at Nell. She gave the smallest nod and stood. She said there was one objection. Every head turned. Nell walked to the center of the table without hurry and set down her folder. Before anyone signed, she said, the principals needed to understand whether the sale was legally enforceable, because right now it was not. Dawson's hand stopped over the pen. He asked what she meant. Nell said she was company counsel, and it was her job to make sure they did not sign something void. She opened the folder and drew out the soft-cornered original. She said these were the founding bylaws of Hendricks Millworks, adopted in 1994, never amended, never replaced. Marcus stepped forward and said the operating agreement superseded them. Nell laid a second page down and said the operating agreement had never been ratified. The minutes showed no vote adopting it. That meant the original bylaws still governed the company. She picked up the first page and read aloud, clear and even. No sale of the company, no transfer of its core assets, and no change in fundamental control would be valid without the written approval of the founder's shares held by the originating founder. Then she set the page down and said those founder's shares belonged to Walt Hendricks, and I still held them. That meant no sale of the company was valid without my signature. The room went silent, truly silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the heat ticking in the walls. Avery from Smith Capital frowned and leaned toward his colleague to whisper. The junior was already flipping pages. Tom Bradley let out a slow breath and almost smiled. Dawson stared at the document as if it might rearrange itself. He said that could not be right. Nell gently told him it was the founding document of the company he was trying to sell, and it was the first thing anyone should have read. I finally spoke, quietly, with no heat in my voice. I told the room they were free to vote however they liked, but none of them could sell what they did not control. Nobody moved. Marcus recovered first, because he always did. He said it was a stunt, that the bylaws were 30 years old and had been drafted by a man with no legal training. Nell cut in and said age did not void a document. Only a proper amendment could do that, and there was not one. She had checked every set of minutes back to 1994. Marcus said they could litigate it. Nell agreed that they could, for years, and then she turned to the Smith team and asked if they wanted to buy a lawsuit instead of a company. She asked whether they would close on assets they could not legally acquire. Avery was already standing and buttoning his jacket. He said they needed to pause the session, and that their firm did not proceed on contested control. He nodded curtly, and the three of them gathered their folders and walked out. The leather signing portfolio left with them untouched. That fast, the sale was finished. Dawson shot to his feet and told Marcus to fix it. Before Marcus could answer, Tom Bradley spoke up. He said he had a question for Mr. Vale. He held up his phone and said, Smith Capital's filing listed a transaction advisor collecting a percentage on closing. The name was Marcus Vale. He asked if that was Marcus. The room turned again. Marcus opened his mouth, then shut it. Bradley said Marcus had stood up there and told them the sale was best for the company, but never mentioned he would personally pocket a fee on the way out. Marcus called it standard practice. Nell called it an undisclosed conflict of interest to the board. The investors who had voted with Dawson were now staring at Marcus with very different faces. The young one in the third chair, the eager nodder, had gone pale. Marcus looked to Dawson for help. Dawson looked at the table. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood who had actually been running the play. The room waited for Dawson to say something. Anything. He did not have it. This was the part I had dreaded, even after everything. Watching my son realize in front of everyone that he had built his entire takeover on a document he had never read. He had asked for the cap table, the ownership percentages, every number Marcus could feed him, but he had never once opened the founding bylaws of the company he wanted to sell. The most basic paper there was, the first thing you read, because reading it would have meant admitting his father had built something solid enough to outlast a bad plan. I told Dawson quietly that he had not known about the founder's shares. It was not cruel. It was only true. He had never looked. His face told the whole room he had not. The young investor who had nodded along to every slide about me being too old to keep up was now looking at Dawson, the man who had missed the single most important page in the building. I watched it dawn on him, and on all of them, who in that room had actually failed to do the homework. It was not the 63-year-old. I said the technology I supposedly could not keep up with, and the instinct that supposedly clouded my judgment would not have caught that clause for them. They needed the thing they had skipped. The fundamentals. Tom Bradley said it more plainly. It looked like the old man had read the documents, and the young one had not. A couple of investors actually nodded. Dawson opened his mouth. For the first time in years, my son had nothing to say to me. He just stood there in my chair, in front of everyone, holding a pen for a deal that no longer existed. I did not feel triumph. I felt tired, sad, and steady. Then I said we needed to talk about what happened next. What happened next took about an hour, and it was almost quiet. Nell laid out where things stood. The Smith Capital deal was gone. No firm would touch a contested sale. The 7-5 vote to shift operations still stood on paper, but it had been taken on Marcus's misleading numbers, and now the board knew it. Tom Bradley called for a new vote, not on a sale, but on leadership. He moved to reinstate me to full operational control pending a proper transition plan, a real one. This time, the count was not close. Once the investors understood the slides had been shaped against the truth, that flat growth had been dressed up as failure, and that 3 years without layoffs had been hidden from them, they swung back hard. They had not wanted me gone. They had wanted the company safe. Now they knew which man had actually put it at risk. 11-1. The one was Dawson. Then came Marcus. The board voted to suspend him pending an investigation into the undisclosed advisory fee. Nell would handle it by the book. Conflict of interest. Breach of fiduciary duty. He left the room without his tablet, with 2 security men walking him to the door. He did not look at Dawson once. When the dust settled, I stood and addressed the room. I thanked everyone who had come ready to do right by the company. I told them we were not for sale. We never had been. I explained the numbers Marcus had left out. 3 years. No layoffs through the worst market in a decade. Steady orders. A loyal crew. I told them that was not sentiment. That was a business that knew what it was for. Down on the floor, word spread before I even got there. When I came down the stairs, Ray was waiting. Hank, Dolores, the whole legacy crew, and a lot of the younger ones were there too. Nobody cheered. It was not that kind of moment. Ray simply stuck out his hand and welcomed me back. 200 jobs, the pensions, all still standing. That was the only victory I cared about. I found Dawson in the parking lot, alone by his car. He did not turn when he heard me. For a long moment, we just stood there in the cold. Finally, he told me to go ahead and say it, that I had won. I told him I had not come to gloat. He turned around, and his eyes were red. He said I had embarrassed him in front of everyone. I told him he had chosen the room. I had given him the break room. I had given him the kitchen. I had asked him to walk away. He had no answer for that. I asked if the debt was real, the bad investments. His jaw worked. He said it was 200,000, maybe more. I asked why he had not come to me. His voice cracked when he said it was because I would have looked at him like he was a failure, the same way he thought I was looking at him now. That hit harder than anything that had happened upstairs. I told him I was not looking at him like a failure. I was looking at him like a son who had gotten lost. There was a difference. I let that sit. Then I told him what would happen next. He was off the leadership committee. That was done. He would keep his shares. He was still my boy, and they were still his inheritance. But if he wanted to actually run the company someday, he would have to earn it. He would start on the floor with Ray. He would learn how a table gets built. He would learn the names, the whole thing from the bottom. He laughed bitterly and repeated the floor. I told him he had wanted my chair, but I would give him something better if he earned it. The truth about how the place was built. Most men never get that offer. I put my hand on his shoulder. He did not pull away. I told him we would deal with the debt together as a family, not by selling out 200 people. He looked at me for a long time and asked why, after all of it. I told him because that was what fathers did. The weeks after that were quiet work. Marcus did not wait around for the investigation. The undisclosed fee was clear as day, and he knew it. He resigned within the week before the board could even convene a hearing, and the agreement he had built collapsed with him. He moved on to some other company out east. I did not follow it. I sat down with Ray and the legacy crew and put it in writing this time. Not a handshake. A real signed amendment drafted by Nell, protecting the pension obligations no matter who ran the company after me. The thing I had promised in the break room became permanent. I told Ray I should have done it years ago. He said I did it when it counted. And here's the part I have to own. Dawson was not entirely wrong about me. I had let the company fall behind. I had dug my heels into the old ways because they were mine, because change felt like admitting I was getting older. So I did something I should have done long before any of this. I started modernizing my way, slowly, carefully, keeping the people. I brought in a young systems manager myself. I vetted her myself. She was sharp, and she actually explained things instead of making me feel stupid. We updated the floor, the reporting, the cloud systems, whatever else needed doing. Turns out an old dog can learn. He just needs someone to teach him with respect instead of contempt. The difference between Marcus and her was simple. Marcus used my weakness to push me out. She used it as a place to start helping, and Dawson showed up on the floor. Monday morning, work boots, no big talk. Ray put him on the sanders. He was terrible at first, with sawdust in his hair and blisters on his soft hands. But he came back Tuesday, and then the Tuesday after that. That told me more than any apology could. It has been about 8 months now. The company is steady, better than steady. The modernization is paying off. Orders are up. The floor is humming. The books are cleaner than they have been in years. We did it without losing a single job. Turns out you can have the future and the people both. Marcus never believed that, and he was wrong. Tom Bradley joined the board's executive committee. The younger investors who had been so quick to write me off come around now and actually ask questions before they vote. One of them, the eager nodder from that first meeting, pulled me aside a while back and told me he owed me an apology. He said he had judged me by my age, and that had been a mistake. I told him it was all right. People do it all the time. It is the easiest mistake there is. I am still in the chair, but not forever. That is the point. There is a real succession plan now, written down with a real timeline. Not a takeover. A plan. Dawson is still on the floor. 8 months in, he is not terrible anymore. He knows most of the crew by name. He has learned how a joint goes together, how long the glue takes, and why you do not rush the finish. Last week, he caught a flaw in a batch that the quality software missed. He came to my office to tell me about it with proud sawdust on his shirt. He said the system had passed it, but the grain was wrong, and he could feel it. I told him that was instinct, the thing that supposedly clouded my judgment. He had the grace to laugh. We are not fully mended, him and me. That takes longer than 8 months. But we are working. Father and son, learning to trust again, one honest day at a time. Carol said it best. The night it was all over, she put her hand over mine at the kitchen table and told me I had not saved the chair. I had saved the people. She said that was the man she married. I have held on to that. Dawson's debt is getting paid down together, just like I said it would be. Most evenings, I still walk the floor at closing. Old habit. The machines wind down. Dust settles in the last daylight through the high windows, and the crew heads for the door. I stand by the exit and say goodnight to each of them the way I always have. I tell Hank goodnight and ask him to tell Katie we are rooting for her. I tell Dolores to get some rest. Ray flips the last light and waves on his way out. I know every name. I always have. That was the thing they tried to use against me, that I cared too much. That I held on to people who supposedly could not keep up. They called it weakness. They called it sentiment. They called me too old to understand the future. But here's what I figured out, standing on that dock the day I read what Smith Capital had planned. The names are not the weakness. The names are the whole point. A company is not a number on a slide. It is Hank's daughter at college. It is Dolores's 31 years. It is Ray's pension. It is the 200 families who go home every night because somebody decided they mattered more than a quick payout. My son thought he was taking something from me when he stood up in that room. A chair, a title, the respect of people in suits. But he could not take the thing that actually mattered, because I had written it down in my own hand at a kitchen table 31 years ago, back when I trusted handshakes more than lawyers. Ray waves from the doorway, and I tell him goodnight. Then I stand there alone for a minute in the quiet of the place I built, thinking about all of it. They said I was too old to lead. Turned out I was just old enough to know what was worth protecting. Let me step out of the story one last time. If you made it all the way here, thank you for sitting with an old man's story. It means more than you know. If you have ever been written off by someone who underestimated you, tell me in the comments how you proved them wrong. I read every single one. And if this story gave you something, subscribe and check the next one in the description. It is about a daughter whose family told her she would never amount to anything, and the day she proved every one of them wrong. You will want to know how that one ends. Take care of yourselves, and do not let anybody tell you your best work is behind you.